I don't know how to listen. The trouble is we're distant, wandering away. It doesn't help, you never feel like kissing. There's always some condition, but I miss you, baby. Miss you, baby, baby. Can we get right tonight, tonight? Can we get right tonight, tonight? Can we get right? Whoa, oh, oh, oh. Hey, I need some of your love tonight. I need some of your love. So kiss my lips and hold me tight. Let's get it right. Chances are we'll have to make some changes to get back to the basics, to get back to your smile. We should be holding hands and making faces. Somebody's gotta say, I love you, baby. I love you, baby, baby. Can we get right tonight? tonight, can we get right? Tonight, tonight, can we get right? Whoa, whoa. I need some of your love tonight. I need some of your love. So kiss my lips and hold me tight. Let's get it right. Yeah, 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 yeah. Let's get it right. Get it right. Oh, oh, whoa. Let's get it right. Let's get it right.
sit and wait in vain. I guess I'll rap on your door, tap on your window pane. I wanna tell you, baby, the changes I've been going through, missing you until you come back to me. That's what I'm gonna do. Why did you have to decide you had to set me free? I'm gonna swallow my pride, beg you to please see me. I'm gonna walk by myself to prove that my love is true, all for you, until you come back to me. That's what I'm gonna do. Living for you, my dear, is like living in a world of constant fear. Hear my plea. Oh, I've got to make you see that our love is dying. Although your phone you ignore, somehow I must explain. I'm gonna rap on your door, tap on your window pane. I'm gonna camp by your steps until I get through to you. Change your view until you come back to me. That's what I'm gonna do. Until you come back to me.
Mr. Mayor, we had no reportable items this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Munoz. Welcome, everyone, to the Dana Point City Council meeting of January 19th, 2016. We will now reconvene our meeting. Pledge of Allegiance. We will begin our Pledge of Allegiance led by former Mayor Carlos Rivera.
Let us pray. Gracious God, we give you thanks for this day and the opportunity to be together. We pray your blessing upon the City Council and those gathered here. Grant them your spirit, the spirit of wisdom and insight, that everything done would be to your glory and for the welfare of our city. We pray this in your holy name. Amen.
Our next order of business is presentations and proclamations. The first presentation this evening will be the business of the month, and that's Casanova Ristorante. Ms. Rachel Johnson, could you please present a PowerPoint presentation on Casanova, please?
Good evening, Mayor Tomlinson and members of the council. I am pleased to announce the business of the month for January 2016, Casanova Ristorante. Tonight, we are joined by the restaurant owner, Chris Ligaris, and general manager, Stefano Zinos. In 1968, cousins Chris and Stefano came to the United States from Greece and started working in the family business, restaurants, until they were able to save $9,000 so that they could open their very first restaurant together. For the past 47 years, they have owned and operated 27 successful restaurants in Southern California. Chris and Stefano always want their restaurants to be personable and have personality so that anyone who walks in their doors feels at home. With the friendly environment of Dana Point, when the opportunity came up for them to buy Casanova in 2012, it seemed to be the perfect fit for what they always envisioned for their restaurants. Not only was the restaurant a perfect fit, but so was Dana Point, as it reminds these cousins of their hometown in Greece, right by the water. For the past 3 years, Casanova's has blossomed, and while still holding on to that friendly neighborhood restaurant feeling, it has become a destination restaurant attracting people from all over the country. The most popular items include the burrata plate, cioppino alla Vinzana, as well as the shrimp fra diavolo. Every day, Casanova is packed during happy hour from 3:30 to 6 p.m. with many familiar faces as well as many new faces. Giving back to the community that they enjoy so much is important to Chris and Stefano. Because of this, they proudly support the Arc of San Juan, Dana Hills High School, and help to provide meals for the Twilight Dinner at the Dana Point Senior Center. On behalf of the City Council, we would like to congratulate you for being selected as Business of the Month for January. We wish you many years of continued success.
Gentlemen, if you please approach the podium, we have a certificate of recognition to give you. Yeah, come on over here. The certificate reads, "The City of Dana Point takes great pleasure in featuring Casanova Ristorante." How do you pronounce that?
Ristorante.
Okay, I'm getting pretty close. Located on Del Obispo Street in Dana Point, and extends our congratulations on being named Dana Point Featured Business of the Month. On behalf of myself and members of the Dana Point City Council, we present you this plaque.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. If you haven't been to Casanova's yet, I'll tell you it has the best cioppino I can find on the West Coast. So it's excellently prepared, and I haven't ventured out to too many of their dishes because I can't just pull away from the cioppino. It's really good. And if you get a chance to try it, you should do it. It's the best on the West Coast that I found, and probably in the United States. So congratulations, gentlemen. Would you like to say a few words?
you so much.
No, a long time ago, as young people, we have a small boat sailing outside of the harbor, and that reminds us the old country. Many, many years later, and many restaurants we operate, here we are. Every day we come to work happy to meet, serve, and enjoy the wonderful people of Dana Point. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you so much. We appreciate that.
All right, thank you, guys. I have a pin for you to. And we also have Heather Johnson from the Dana Point City Chamber of Commerce to also make a presentation. Thank you.
Sorry, I was hiding. Well, we all know why the mayor chose you, just based on how much he raves about your food. Just want to say thank you for being a business in Dana Point. Thank you for being a great member, and congratulations. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for having us.
Okay, the next presentation is December Employee of the Month, and that is Jeff Rosler. Mr. Fowler, can you give us a report and background on Mr. Rosler, please?
Well, I'd love to do that, but I think Ursula might prefer it because all I know is about when Jeff used to work for the city, when he worked for me.
Okay.
He was a good employee then, but
He's even better
he's
now.
a better employee now.
You know, Mr. Mayor, this is where we play This Is Your Life, Jeff Rosler. So, Mr. Mayor, if you could go down and invite Ursula and Jeff up. And Brad, you come on up too, because you found Jeff. You started this off, so you have some responsibility for this. But let Ursula talk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of the City Council. I'd really like to thank you for acknowledging Jeff as our Employee of the Month. It's been a pleasure for me to get to know Jeff. He and I share similar stories of having some ties with Dana Point and leaving and coming back, and actually under some somewhat similar circumstances. And he is also raising his lovely family here in Dana Point as well. And Jeff is a code enforcement officer, and that's not always the easiest job. You're often telling people things that they don't want to hear about, things that they're not doing correctly. But ultimately, it's about obtaining compliance, and Jeff does a really good job of doing that. And you can drive around many of the neighborhoods and see the difference that he's making in our community. And I think that it's the kind of highest compliment when you have somebody who you're telling to do something differently than the way they're doing it to compliment you after the fact. And we get a lot of those compliments from Jeff, and also a lot of compliments from some of the we'll call them frequent flyer mile complainers that ultimately really acknowledge and appreciate Jeff's efforts as well. So his dedication to the city is very much appreciated by myself, and I know the rest of the council and the mayor. So thank you.
Thank you, Ursula. Brad, would you like to make a few comments?
My boss said no. Thank you.
Okay. Well, that being said, we have a plaque for you, Jeff, and I'd like to present you a plaque, so let me get it for you. So I was reviewing this earlier, and there's a lot of whereases on here where it commends your service and your education and your dedication to the city, but I'd like to take the opportunity to read a few of them here. Jeff has worked on many complex code enforcement issues regarding a significant level of professional training and experience, and he's an excellent problem solver, showing outstanding initiative. Next one, whereas Jeff's willingness to focus on solutions while striving to maintain the highest quality of living standards for our community exemplifies the city's commitment to providing 5-star service to its customers. So on behalf of the City Council and citizens of Dana Point, I hereby congratulate Jeff Rosler upon his selection as the City of Dana Point Employee of the Month for January 2016, and express heartfelt appreciation for his devoted service to the citizens of Dana Point, and express her sincere thanks for his exemplary service to our community. Thank you very much, Jeff. Could you bring up your family? Would you like to introduce your family?
Come on up here, Lincoln. Actually, do I get to talk, sir?
Yes, you do, Jeff.
Fair enough. All right, this is my beautiful wife, Allison, and this is Lillian and Cassius and Lincoln Rossler. And we live in Capo Beach, and we love it here and couldn't be happier. And I know I got to leave once, and I doubt I'll get to leave again.
You know, Mr. Mayor, if I could just add, Jeff was the person who put together our Nature Interpretive Center way back when, as well as the interpretive element there, and then he left to go up north, took his lovely family up there. His wife Allison puts in untold hours at the Ocean Institute. She was the one who basically ran the house auction or the home auction event for the Ocean Institute, and they're the consummate community family. Jeff saw the error of his ways. He came back on bent knee and said, "Will you take me back?" And so I said, "Okay, Jeff, but you got to be a code enforcement officer." And you know, I'm just happy to have people like Jeff here. Now, Jeff, Ursula said you came back. You weren't a homecoming queen, were you? Okay, I'll leave it at that. Because we only have one homecoming queen, and that's Ursula. So thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. I also have some pins, and now if you boys would wear these pins with pride for what your daddy has accomplished here tonight, that would make me very happy. So, and young lady, there you go. There you go, young man. Again, thank you, Jeff, for all your service to this community and the city. Thank you very much.
Mr. Mayor, if I may add about Jeff, one of those whereases on that certificate should say, and whereas he bought a tie and got a coat.
Okay, moving on, we now move to our consent calendar. All matters listed on the consent calendar are considered to be routine, and all will be enacted by one roll call vote. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless members of the City Council, the public, or staff request specific items be removed from the consent calendar for separate action. Are there any items to be removed by staff?
Not this evening, sir.
Any by the public, Madam Clerk?
One item, number 16.
Number 16. And any by the council members?
Number 18, Mr. Mayor.
Number 18. Do I hear a motion to move the balance?
So moved.
Second. Call for the vote. The consent calendar passes 5-0.
Thank you.
Okay. Moving on to item number 16. Is there a staff report for item number 16?
Yes, there is, Mayor Tomlinson. Item number 16 is a recommendation that the council authorize the city to submit a grant proposal to OCTA for continuation of our summer trolley program. A few brief remarks I'd like to make are that this is something that we've been working on for a number of years. And much to Brad's credit, he really put in a lot of effort to come up with what I think is a great first-year effort. It exceeded everybody's expectations. And, you know, the only comment I have is why can't he extend it up to my track? And I know I've gotten that that concern by others. But one of the things we have to remember is that we have, it's not that we have limited resources, but we don't have unlimited resources, and we're working with OCTA, and we're in the first few initial years. Ridership exceeded our initial expectations, which is very good. The other thing is that when in meeting with the Coastal Commission staff last week, I talked a little bit about it, and they were excited to hear the progress. And I pointed out the Dana Point Trolley app, and they were excited to see that. And we're going to work some more on some other mobile apps to create greater access opportunities to the coast and Dana Point. The other person I want to acknowledge and thank is John Petig, the city manager of Laguna Beach. We always talk about the Laguna Beach transit, the trolley, summer trolley, and John was quick to work with us so that the two would connect up. I understand that Brad's been having a dialogue with the city of San Juan, and they initiated their trolley last summer, and it was very popular in that city, and our hope is that they'll drop down to Doheny Village, so in essence, you can get a free ride from the Mission San Juan Capistrano to Main Beach and Laguna Beach. And so it's infectious, it's catching on, and so we're, again, going to carefully monitor it this year and next year, but all indications are that we have a very successful program. So with that, Brad and I would be happy to respond to any questions the council may have.
Any questions from the council? Councilman Miller.
So with this new proposal, are we getting the new open-air trolleys this year?
Brad?
Yes, they're under construction now. So they should arrive in May. So we have 4 trolleys that are open air that will start this summer.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions from council members? Hearing none, we'll move on to public comment. We have one speaker this evening, and it's Beth Owis. I believe I pronounced it correctly. Beth, would you approach the podium?
First of all, I just want to say we are in support of the trolley. I think it's a wonderful idea. And I'm going to read this because I was sort of told to represent everyone from our shopping center here at the last minute. So, but I'm here as one of the business owners in the Monarch Beach Promenade in Dana Point, my own lingerie paradis. It's on the corner of Nigel Road and Del Avion, and it is Dana Point, not Laguna Niguel. And I'm also representing Rococo Boutique, Dr. Wagner, give it glasses, the Mailroom, the Daniel Paul Salon, and the Monarch Beach Market. Not everyone could make the meeting today. We are all in support of adding a trolley stop to our center. It is only 2 short blocks from the last turnaround stop at the St. Regis currently. We have plenty of parking, and it would be an easy turnaround point. The trolley stops at almost all of other shopping centers in Dana Point, and we would love to be included. We have seen our center's sales decrease in the summer months, and this would be a great boost for all our businesses. The market offers great takeout food for beach picnic events. I carry beachwear, swimwear in my store. Brio is great for cocktails and amazing Italian cuisine. There's a hair and nail salon and an urgent care in the center. I hope you will all see the importance of adding the stop to your plan. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. And that being the only speaker, I'll close the public comments section of this staff report. So any discussion from the council?
I just have a question, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Mr.
Yeah, tonight we're not here to discuss altering the route or anything, as I understand it. That's pretty much cast in stone by OCTA.
Mr. Shotcaves?
Brett?
Well, I am interested as we go for the grant funding on what you would like to see in the future. So I guess the answer is.
And one of the things
we would like your feedback.
Yeah, and that's important because one of the things when you look at the trolley and you look inside Dana Point going further, I know there's a lot of neighborhoods in the center up in the northern part of Dana Point that run along Del Avion. For example, close to my proximity is the Albertson Center, and I'm sure that Albertsons and Casanova would love to have a location there. I'm sure Ocean Ranch would love to have a location there. And one of the issues we're facing is that, again, this is a initial program we're rolling out with we don't have, it's not that we have limited resources, but we have to live within our budget. as we move forward and more cities come on board, and perhaps there'll be other opportunities to expand our routes, but it's going to be something that I think has to be done in an incremental fashion. And my hope is that, and maybe next year, after this year, if it continues on, that we can start expanding it to those centers, because again, there's a lot of people who live Dana Woods, my neighborhood, over in Monarch Beach, who would like to have access to it too, and in Capo Beach too. There's people, I'm sure they would love to see it, run up along the bluff top there. So again, I think in the future, but again, we want to hear all those comments, and we'll factor them as best we can.
The point I was making, Mr. Mayor, is that tonight we can't recommend specific route changes, but we can study the evolutionary of the transit system relative to the budget, relative to the community need, relative to the community desire, and stuff like that. Because as I recall, Brad, correct me if I'm wrong, when we worked on this earlier, that was a very dynamic process in terms of what funding was available, what fares may be charged ultimately, where it could go, what the costs are, and everything like that. So I don't want to leave people leaving thinking they are or aren't going to get a stop, but rather this is an evolutionary process that's based on success, time in the field, public comment, things like that, that's going to hopefully grow over the years. Okay?
Thank you, Mr. Schofel. Any other comments? Well, I'd like to add that the public response I've gotten from the community is fantastic. People are looking forward to the trolley coming back in its new form, and some new residents from moving to the community are really happy to see this coming around and serving them. So with that, any other further comments? Oh, go ahead, Joe.
Mr. Fowler, a quick question. OCTA is proposing eliminating some of the bus routes in town. And is there any way that we could try to recover some of that funding, not all of it, because obviously that was a cost-cutting measure on their part, to try to supplement some of these routes since we're going to start picking them up locally?
I think the answer is that they're different funding sources. We're going in, and as we apply for more grant funds this time around, we can look to the future and ask to have some expanded routes in the future. But part of the OCTA bus changes that was on the agenda tonight is looking not only to reduce some routes, but to put that lost money to other routes where they have greater demand. So it's not that they're going to end up with less money in their proposed program. They're shifting money to other higher needs than the low ridership that we have.
All right, thank you.
Seeing no further comments, I'd like to call for the vote.
I need a motion.
Oh, I need a motion. I'm sorry.
Second.
All right. Been regularly moved and seconded. We'll call for the vote. I was trying to do a shortcut from there. I apologize to everybody. Okay, moving on to number 18.
Mr. Mayor, that's a consensus 5-0 vote.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. Okay, moving on to item number 18. Mr. Schofel, since you pulled the item, is there any need for a staff report from your point?
I'd just like a short staff report from the city manager, and then I'd like to add some commentary to it as well. And I know our community development director has some comments as well. I think this is an item that is of significant interest to our residents, and I think we have a lot of very good news to report on this item this evening.
Thank you, Councilmember Schofel. I just to echo Councilmember Schofel remarks, I'm really excited about this because this is another example of the Dana Point City Council getting out in front of an issue that's facing virtually every city in California. And they initiated this effort back in April of 2014. And we started the process, had some meetings, but I think what really made the difference is I took Russ to a Orange County City Managers meeting. We have these meetings on a monthly basis, and they talked about the success that Lake Forest was having with their dedicated homeless liaison deputy. And so Russ came back, and I said, Russ, make something happen there. And so he identified Tobin Anderson, who's in the back. And Tobin has just literally run through doors with this. He's done a lot of outreach. He knows the homeless population. But what's really refreshing is because of Tobin's efforts, I'd have to say at least over 30 people have found their way off the streets and into one program or another, with the bulk of them working with the Orange County Mission. And these are people who, Tobin has virtually, lifted up off the pavement, put in his car, and they say, Deputy Anderson, I want help. And Tobin's done a remarkable job, and I know he saved a lot of souls that way. Having said that, that was just one part of it. The past year, the Homeless Task Force took on a lot of really good activities to get their hands around this issue. One of the issues we did is we hired Larry Haynes from Mercy House through Vanguard University, and Larry came in and did an enumeration of our homeless population. Many of his findings are outlined here. And so what we have before you tonight is an update, but also a recommendation to formalize an arrangement with Mercy House, with Larry on board, to help us really take the social aspect of putting people in touch with the services that are available to the next level. And I think if you put Tobin and Larry together on this, I mean, you folks are going to be really out there doing cutting-edge stuff to get your hands around, but to deal with it in a very productive way and save a lot of people's lives. So with that, I would go back to Mr. Schoeffel. He has been the council's liaison and has done a lot of work in this area. Mr. Schoeffel.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Shotkevis. One of the first things we had to do to get a grip on the homeless problem and was figure out how many there are by standard definitions of that status in the city, and that's where Larry Haynes, Mercy House, subcontracting with Dr. Clark of Vanguard University, came along. And if you ask most residents, and I did ask many residents in the city, well, how many homeless people do we have here? 700, 1,500. I mean, they're all over the place. It can't go anywhere without seeing the homeless. But when you actually start applying methodical, industry standard approaches to enumerating those who have the status of homeless, we found out after, Ursula, how long did it take? 2, 3, 4 months, something like that? The estimate is somewhere 20 to 30, and it's based upon where they spend their night. It's where they spend their evening, essentially. The rest of the population that you see wandering in and out that don't appear to have homes, that you might see soliciting, things like that, beyond the 20 to 30, different population, different approach, as the city manager said, to deal with it. So having established that figure, then the question was, well, what approach do we use for each class of a person out there? Are they a Tobin Anderson Sheriff's Department problem? I hasten to mention that Chief Chilton was a very significant part of this effort, getting Tobin Anderson and other deputies to work on this, getting them replaced in proper programs, things like that. Or is there something that we need to do on a more compassionate, consistent basis with the 20, 30 that have been enumerated? They're spending their night underneath a tree in a park, or all the various places that these folks find to spend the night. The task force itself is set up of really a very wide variety of stakeholders in the homelessness area. Family Assistance Ministries, Orange County Rescue Mission, to name just a few. And they all brought their own perspectives to the table, and I think some extremely helpful observations to the table. After we received the enumeration report, we said, okay, well, this is the population that we have to deal with. What's the best way to deal with it? Do we go out and build a center? Do we combine with other areas and build regional facilities? after a lot of discussion and frankly, real eye-opening discussions from my standpoint, turns out rapid rehousing was the selected strategy, and that leads us to our request tonight for a contract with Mercy House to work out a rapid rehousing strategy and collateral work that needs to be done to make that happen. I have to tell you, I learned so much during my tenure thus far in this task force, and from people who dedicate their professional careers, their lives to this, who are not let any detail escape them. And I think that the discussion was very full, very forthright. We also had members of the business community involved so that we could get their perspectives on this. And I feel that the task force has really done some excellent work here and has come up with a recommendation that I can happily and very comfortably endorse to the council. Love to hear your comments. Ursula, did I miss anything?
You did not. I would just like to thank you for your participation on the task force, as well as all of the other members. They are donating their time to participate in that task force, and it's very much appreciated.
You know, Russ, since you played such a prominent role, is there anything you'd like to add to the discussion?
No, so far I've been very pleased with the direction we're going, and managing a homeless situation in any community is very challenging, and Tobin being out there, it would be refreshing to see some collaboration with some service providers to help us. I don't think the homeless liaison officer position will ever go away. It's just a part of our operation now. We've had tremendous success, but working more closely with some service providers would be wonderful.
Very good. Thank you.
So just one closing remark is I'll still get comments. I'm sure you gentlemen are still going to get comments. So what's that guy, I aggressively coming to solicit me and this, that, and the other thing. There are limits, and pretty significant limits, that law enforcement can go to tell law-abiding people, even if that's something that some people find offensive on occasion. There's limits to what law enforcement can do in dealing with this. I'm very comfortable that to this point anyway, and I'm sure that it's a process that will continue to evolve in a positive way, that our sheriffs and with the coming assistance of some contractors are going to be on top of this problem as much as any city in this area can possibly be. We are a very positive Yelp site for transients and homeless. If you go look, people like to come here to engage in that lifestyle. And so it is a challenge because we are such a nice place. We have such a hospitable climate, and it's a wonderful place to live. And it's hard work every single day. So happy to recommend this.
Any other questions from other council members? Madam Clerk, I take it there's no public comments?
No, there is not. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's move it back to the council for discussion. Okay. Go ahead.
If there's no discussion, Mr. Mayor, I'd be happy to move the item.
I'll second it.
It's been regularly moved and seconded. I'd like to call for the vote. Motion passes 5-0. Thank you. At this time, the city clerk will read the titles of the ordinances listed on the agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have two ordinance titles to read, and I apologize. I'm trying to get to them here. The first one is a second reading and adoption from item number 11. It is an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Dana Point, California, adding Chapter 5.40 to the Dana Point Municipal Code to prohibit all cannabis-related uses, commercial cannabis activities, and the delivery and cultivation of cannabis in the city. The second item is an introduction and first reading. It's part of item number 25, subsection E. It's an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Dana Point, California, acting as the legislative body of the City of Dana Point Community Facilities District number 2015-1, Doheny Beach, levying special taxes within the City of Dana Point Community Facilities District number 2015-1, Doheny Beach. Thank you.
At the mayor's discretion, the balance of the public comments will be heard after the business portion of the agenda. All comments are to be directed to the City Council and shall not consist of any personal attacks. Members of the public are expected to maintain a professional, courteous decorum during their comments. State law prohibits the City Council from taking any action on a specific item unless it appears on the posted agenda. All right, we have two public comments this evening. The first is Brett Johnson, followed by Dan Daly. Mr. Johnson?
He just walked out.
Okay. Well, we'll let Mr. Daly go first then.
Thank you and good evening. My name is Dan Daly. I'm with Alzheimer's Orange County. Last month, a decision was made that we became a separate entity and an independent entity of the National Alzheimer's Association. So as a result, the Orange County chapter is now Alzheimer's Orange County. So even though the name has changed, the mission is not. We will continue to provide numerous programs and services to the 84,000 affected by Alzheimer's as well as dementia-related disorders in Orange County. Some of the programs that would fall under these descriptions would be a helpline, support groups, family care consultation, and numerous educational seminars. All of these programs and resources will continue to be provided at no charge. Now, prior to us becoming an independent, there was, of every dollar raised, 40 cents went to the national office. From here on out, 100% of every dollar raised will stay in Orange County for the benefit of the families and also all the research efforts to find a cure for this devastating disease. And again, even though the name has changed, the mission stays intact. If there's any additional information anyone may need, please feel free to call our helpline number, which is 844-373-4400, or go to the website, which is www.alzoc.org. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to address you and to make this public statement. And the best of luck to everybody for 2016. Thank you again. And I'm going to leave some information for you, and I'll leave them here with the clerk.
Mr. Daly, for the record, can you please state your name and city of residence?
Yes, I live at 33558 Hollywood Drive, Dana Point, in the Gala Shores.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments this evening.
All right, thank you for your time.
I understand Mr. Johnson just returned to the room, so Mr. Johnson, could you please approach the podium and state your name and address, city of residence for the record, please?
Sure. My name is Brett Johnson. I live at 33821 Mariana Drive in Dana Point, and just wanted to kind of make a public statement. I've been doing some door knocking lately. I'm a realtor, but I've been kind of taking it upon myself to kind of get a consensus on everyone's feelings about the Town Center Rejuvenation Project, and specifically kind of an opposition from the Save Dana Point to the current Town Center plan, just kind of figuring out, I hear a lot of things out in the streets, wanted to figure out what people's general mindset was. So I kind of took it upon myself to generate a website. I've been going to the city office and pulling the building permits, publishing them, publishing videos that Ms. Ward had told me about that were readily available on the website that I had no idea. So just kind of wanted to thank everyone here that they are being very transparent. There's lots of rumors going out there, people building 60-foot buildings that are coming to our city, so there's still a little bit of miscommunication going on, but I think we're working towards the right direction, and if we continue moving down the path that we've done, we'll get there. So that's just kind of what I wanted to bring up, and thank Ms. Ward for letting me know about all the resources that I can help educate people. And that's it.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Johnson. We'll now move on to the public hearings portion of this meeting. Is there a staff report from item number 25?
Yes,
Chuck Avery.
At this time, I'd like to ask Mr. Killebrew to provide an overview of tonight's recommended action.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Doug, there is a prescribed process under which a city must follow under state law to comply with property owner's request to establish a community facilities district. The city has been marching down that compliance path, if you will, since the summer months. And tonight, we are required to hold a hearing. In November, the City Council passed a couple of resolutions that set the date of the hearing to be tonight. We do have an owner's representative in the audience here, in Jim McMenamin. At this point, and as we mentioned in the staff report, there's still a couple of steps that need to be done in this process where we're relying on a couple of other government agencies to approve pieces of this. So we have to open up the public hearing, but we're asking the council to continue the hearing to a date certain of February 16th. I also want to mention there's extensive reports that have been done, and those reports, the staff would plan on doing presentations on all the background information for this community facilities district process come February 16th. In order to kick this off, though, we're required, and we have a procedural steps portion of the staff report, but the first order of business prior to opening the hearing would be to request any property owners that are registered, property owners or registered voters within the boundaries of the proposed district who wish to file written protests. If they want to do that, they must file them with the city clerk at this time. I'm looking at the one owner's representative, and I'm going to assume there's no protest. Okay. With that, we'd recommend that the mayor open the public hearing, ask for any public comments, and then, as we recommend, to continue the hearing to February 16th, and again, at which point we would do our extensive presentations of all the work that's been done and continue the hearing at that point.
Thank you very much for your report, Mr. Killebrew. Is there any questions from the council? Seeing none, is there any comments from the public? Madam Clerk?
No, Mr. Mayor.
All right, seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to continue the hearing to the City Council meeting of February 16th, 2016.
So moved.
Second.
Having been regularly moved in second, I will now call for the vote.
Mayor Tomlinson, just as a point of clarification for the record, the motion was to open the public hearing and to continue it to a date certain, correct?
Correct, that was my motion. Yeah.
Thank you. Just wanted to clarify that for the record.
Okay, the motion passes 5-0. The next item on this evening's agenda is item number 26. And Mr. Shakavies, is there a staff report?
Yes, there is. I believe Kurth is going to give the staff report, but just a few introductory comments by myself. As everyone in the audience and on TV and the council is aware, we're in a dire situation relative to drought. And as a result, the governor has come out and created urgency measures, or emergency measures rather, in response for mandated conservation. I had the pleasure last week of meeting with representatives of the San Diego Regional Water Quality Control Board, and there were water district GMs in the room, Mr. Brunhart was there representing South Coast Water District, and I tell you, I was really proud of being able to explain our environmental record when it comes to water quality and water conservation. And over the years, you look at the medians on Coast Highway, they were done with drought-tolerant grant money from OCTA. There's a number of examples throughout the town. Palisades and Coast Highway, we did drought-tolerant landscaping there. And I've asked the staff to take a closer look at the landscaping standards for a practical application with the city of Indian Wells. You know, they are a city that we line up fairly well from a demographic standpoint, and I thought, you know, what a better place to take a look at their landscaping plans. So we're in the process of doing that. But what I felt really good about when I was able to talk to the regional board, and we talked about that, but the piece of the puzzle that I was excited about was the fact that because of our efforts, when they came out, the governor came out and mandated a 25% reduction. I challenged staff come up with a 28% reduction. Lo and behold, our reduction was up above 45%. As many people saw, our parks were starting to show signs of stress, and as we got a handle on that in response to the environment and the weather, we even resorted in working very closely with the Department of Health and the water quality agencies to allow us to truck in reclaimed water to try and, you know, while the parks were brown, we didn't want them to die. And so, you know, Kevin and Brian rose to the occasion, and it's been really, really gratifying. So I'm really proud of the efforts that the council has allowed us to do to be truly an environmentally responsible city. What I'd like to do now is the Planning Commission took action to pass forward a zone text amendment on landscaping standards. So with that, Kurth, could you please provide us with an overview of what's before the council tonight?
Yes, thank you, Doug. Mayor Tomlinson, members of the City Council. As Doug mentioned, last year the governor issued Executive Order B-19-25 proclaiming the state of emergency throughout the state due to the ongoing drought. One of the provisions of that executive order required the State Department of Water Resources to update the State Model Water Efficient Landscape Ordinance, or MWELO, by increasing water efficiency standards for new and existing landscapes through more efficient irrigation systems, increasing gray water usage, increasing on-site stormwater capture, and by limiting the portion of landscapes that can be covered in turf grasses. Annual reporting by local jurisdictions of the updated ordinance was also required by the executive order. In response to this directive, the Municipal Water District of Orange County organized a stakeholder drafting committee to formulate revisions to the Orange County MOLO and corresponding guidelines, as was done in 2009 in response to State Assembly Bill 1881 related to water conservation in landscaping. The city had previously adopted the Orange County MOLO in 2009, and staff has updated the city's water efficient landscape standards consistent with the revisions formulated by the stakeholder drafting committee and commensurate with the state MOLO. Primary changes are a reduction in the landscape area thresholds, triggering implementation of the water efficient landscaping standards, and removal of the application of the standards based on the entity implementing the landscape project. There is also a prescriptive compliance option that has been included for sites with a landscape area of 2,500 square feet or less. This option is outlined in the submittal requirements and guidelines document attached as supporting document B, and allows smaller sites to meet the intent of the ordinance by eliminating many of the submittal requirements of the typical landscape documentation package. In the same manner as it was previously adopted, the local ordinance breaks out the state MOLO into an ordinance document and a guidelines document, referred to as the submittal requirements and guidelines in the city's ordinance. This document is the administrative document that can be updated by staff over time as irrigation technologies improve and as water use reference data is accepted by the State Department of Water Resources. It should be noted that by not updating the city's existing ordinance consistent with the Orange County MOLO, that would automatically subject the city to the requirements of the state MOLO. by retaining local control with an ordinance designed regionally and modified locally to Dana Point's particular climate and review processes, the Water Efficiency Landscape Ordinance update will provide for maximum efficiency and ease in making future revisions to the submittal requirements and guidelines. As Doug mentioned, the Planning Commission reviewed ZTA 15-002 and the associated submittal requirements and guidelines at their January 11th meeting and recommends that the City Council adopt the proposed amendments to Chapter 9.55 of the Dana Point Zoning Code related to water efficient landscape standards. I'd be happy to answer any questions of the council at this time.
Seeing none, thank you for your report, Mr. Kurth. Madam Clerk, are there any comments from the public?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. I move it back to the council for discussion. Is there any discussion?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'll lead off on the discussion. This is a very important issue, and I think Mr. Shotkevis under-tooted his horn about how the city of Dana Point is doing in regards to this issue. The only people that can conserve water are the users. And Dana Point, as a city, is a large user of water with our numerous parks. It's my understanding that the city staff was going to truck potable or recyclable water to our parks, and found out it wasn't as easy as just putting water in a tank and pouring it on the ground. There was a lot of hurdles. Nobody had done it before, so it's kind of like, why are you doing it? We don't have recycled water to all our parks in Dana Point, so it was a necessity for the city to do this. We don't control water usage by setting timers. We control water usage by our design. And that design comes through our code and ordinances like we're looking at tonight. The idea of looking at the use of gray water, that's like water from the showers. There are some people that have already taken that onto themselves to get that outside to their gardens. And it's important that each of us that are here and watching support the city in doing its ordinances to better utilize and make awareness for conservation of water. So I think Dana Point has done an outstanding job in being a leader in South County. I know from this particular ordinance and land irrigation in neighboring cities are a lot looser when some people come from doing jobs in neighboring cities and then coming to the city of Dana Point and find out we expect to dot the I's and cross the T's on water use. So I just like to compliment the staff on the work they're done, and I move to approve this action.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, it's been regularly moved and seconded. Is it call for vote?
Can we please make sure that the public hearing was opened? I might have missed it, but I'm not sure that I heard that.
So the maker of the motion would be to open the public hearing, seeing no one wishing to speak, close the public hearing, then make a motion.
Okay, so done. So we'll open the public hearing now. We have a motion. We'll close the public hearing. Motion's been regularly moved and seconded. Oh, yes, Mr. Vixorek, would you?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I really just have one question to clear up. I think it's for the city attorney. It has to do with the findings, to make sure I'm not confusing two separate issues. I was looking at the findings that we're making regarding finding number 4, allocation-based and tiered water rate structures allow public agencies to document water use in landscapes.
Which finding?
Finding number 4. It's on page 6 of the report. I just want to make sure that I'm not confusing two issues. Was there a case involving San Juan, involving tiered water rates, and how does that apply to this finding? And maybe you can go into that, or are we taking a position on what that case says?
Right, so the San Juan case it really doesn't have a whole lot to do with the findings you're making here. That involved setting rates and for water use, which we don't do. We don't charge people for water services in the city. We don't have a water utility. And the San Juan case was that the city had set different rate structures based on how much water you used. And there would be a jump up in the rate if you hit a certain threshold. And the courts, in essence, said that was a violation of Proposition 218. The ordinance that you're dealing with right now really deals with conservation of water and how it's going to be utilized, but not with setting rates. So none of the issues involved in the San Juan case will come into play here.
Oh, okay, I see. So is anyone setting tiered water? Is there a tiered water rate structure anywhere? I mean, I don't understand what this finding
No.
Is.
Not as part of what we're doing here. Brad, can you shed some light on the
I have a background in the water industry and now with this, but this is just, your finding is basically saying that folks can record tiered usage, and this is documenting the usage. It's not documenting any billings or anything.
And when Prop 218 was established, it had to do with the way commodities, water, sewer, those types of services were charged out to the public. And what we're doing was just indicated here. We're not setting water rates. We're just creating a finding. Correct, Mike?
Correct.
The
Yeah,
usage
South-
can still fall within tiers, which is different than billing users rates that fall within those tiers that are not related to how much water they actually used. So in other words, if you use over 100 gallons, all of a sudden your rates shoot up, but it doesn't have anything to do with how much water you actually used. You might have only used 101 gallon, and you get this much higher rate. That was, simplified, but sort of the issue that was going on in San Juan, the San Juan case. Here we're talking about, your use might fall within those tiers, but you're not being charged any more or less based on that.
Okay, thank you.
Any further discussion? All right, then we'll proceed to vote. Looks like we have 2 pending votes. Now we have 3 pending votes. Oh, now we're back to 1. Oh, it's me. All right. Now we're still at 1 pending vote. All right, the motion passes 5-0 after.
Mr. Mayor, we realized after the fact that the clerk failed to read the ordinance by title on this item. So if you could indulge us and let us have her read it at this time.
Madam Clerk, could you do so, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It is a first reading and introduction of an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Dana Point, California, approving Zone Text Amendment ZTA 15-0002, amending City of Dana Point Zoning Ordinance, Chapter 955, for the purpose of updating the water efficient landscape standards in accordance with the Governor's April 1st drought executive order B-19-15. Thank you.
Mr. Munoz, does that fulfill our requirements now? Are we good?
Yep, we're good.
Thank you, sir. Is there any unfinished business? Hearing none, we'll move on to new business. Mr. Shockley, is there any staff reports?
Yes, item number 17 is it's that time where every year the City Council goes through and reviews its appointed representatives to outside agencies, as well as city committees, subcommittees, and task forces. What we would ask that you make any changes, if you need to make any changes, so we can make the appropriate notification. If there's any change to the OCFA representative, then we would need to have the council approve a resolution designating and appointing its representative. Big change from last year is the fact that OCFA took action wherein that we only have a representative, we don't have an alternate. So I just wanted to throw that out for the council as well as the public. So with that, this is where we turn the meeting over to you, Mr. Mayor, and let you take a council on a review of this and tell us if you'd like to make any changes.
Okay, Madam Clerk, are there any public comments?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, hearing none, I'll proceed with the meeting. I would like to proceed with this item. I'd like to just make the changes that I would recommend, the recommendations, and I'm not going to go through all the committees and agencies, only list them by the ones that have been changed, or that I recommend being changed. And then after that, if there's any discussion on the changes, after that's all been worked out, then we'll take a one roll call vote, one vote on the whole matter. Mr. Munoz, is that sufficient?
If it works for the council, that will work.
All right. Any problems on the council members from that approach? Okay. Hearing none, I'll move down to first recommendation I'd like to make is on the Animal Services Subcommittee. I'd like to replace Councilman Miller as the alternate with Councilman Olvera. Next one down, if you have your list in front of you, it might be helpful. California Joint Powers of Insurance Authority, I'd like to move Mr. Vicsorik as the primary and Mr. Schoeffel as the alternate. Moving down to the Foothill Eastern Transportation Corridor, which is the 73. I'm going to take both of these in tandem, I'd like to. And the other one's the San Joaquin Transportation Corridor. We have a council member that's served this community for over 20 years, and he's been on this particular agency for many years and has provided great input to them. I think from seeing him in action there that the staff and other board members respect and honor his commitment and his input to the process. So with that being said, I would like to recommend for the 73, which is the Foothill Eastern Transportation. Yes.
San Joaquin.
Oh, I'm sorry, I have it backwards. So Foothill's the 241 and the other ancillary, okay. So I'd like to, keep Mr. Schoeffel on one of these as a leadership figure, and then have two councilmen kind of take a training position and learn from what he does. So the first one on the Foothill, I would recommend Mr. Miller as the primary and Mr. Schoeffel as the alternate. And then moving on to the San Joaquin, I would recommend Mr. Schoeffel as the primary and Mr. Vicsorik as the alternate. Mr. Vicsorik. Moving on to the Ocean Institute Board of Directors, I'd like to recommend return to the way it has been in the past, the mayor as the primary and the mayor pro tem as the alternate. That would be myself and Mr. Vicsorik. Flipping the page, as Mr. Shakavius pointed out, Mr. Miller is the primary, and there is no longer an alternate, so we'll move Mr. Vicsorik's name from the Fire Authority. The next two on the list are two-year terms with a one-year unexpired term left, and that would be Orange County Library Advisory Board. That's Mr. Olvera's primary, Mr. Miller's alternate. And the next one is Orange County Mosquito and Vector Control. I'd recommend that Mr. Olvera remain the primary. On the rest of that page, there's no further changes. Going on to the next page, list of boards, commissions, committees, and subcommittees. I have no changes other than the Financial Review Committee, which has been the mayor and the mayor pro tem. So I'd recommend that I be the mayor on that Financial Review Committee, and Mr. Vicsorik be on that committee as well as mayor pro tem. Any discussion of my recommendations? Any clarifications? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm looking at what you did here, and I think one of the important things that you brought up is always succession planning. And we do have a council member that's been here and has done very good work on the toll roads. And, it's one of those things that being from the fire authority and going through what I went through in the first year and trying to do this all on your own and come up to speed by yourself, because I didn't have anybody on the council that I could go to. Our previous rep had turned out and was gone. It was very difficult, and I think it's a good idea to make sure as we're moving people into these positions to become the primaries versus the alternates, we need to think about how we're going to be moving forward as a city, and making sure that as we do this, we have a good mentor behind us, that when we have questions about it, we can expedite the process of moving up into a position of leadership. So, I mean, I like what you did here. You know, on the 73, Scott's done such a good job. It's a tough call. But if we're going to put Councilmember Vic Sork in there moving forward, and I'm not saying that we are. I mean, it could be changed again next year. But I'm just wondering why we didn't do the same thing on 73, and have Scott mentor us up there, because he's got the institutional knowledge.
Well, I think the primary is the one who's on all the committees, I believe, and they are the one that attends most of the meetings. Unless the primary can't, the alternate comes into play. And from my experience, the alternate has no vote and may not sometimes get all the information unless they attend the meeting. So, Mr. Schoeffel, can you fill me more in on the process there?
Your position is correct. The primary is the one who serves on all the committees. It's a committee-driven, both are committee-driven boards. Most of the work on both of those boards are taken up by very significant numbers of committees. And because of my service over an extended period of time, I've attained senior position in most of the committees that require the continuous historic knowledge of what goes on those boards. So that's essentially the difference.
Okay, any further comments on my recommendations?
Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead.
Mr.
Councilman.
Mayor, I support the mayor's recommendations.
Mr. Vic Sork.
All right, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to say that I agree with what Councilman Miller is saying. It actually makes sense to me that we should plan for a succession. If, in fact, I were going to move into the 73, as Mr. Councilman Miller was saying, when he joined the OCFA, didn't have anyone there to help him, it would, I think, be beneficial to the city, and I believe to myself or anyone who were to step into that the appointment should be made now to be the primary, so that they could start getting their feet wet and have Councilman Schoeffel here to provide any support and turnover that we would need, as opposed to when he were to leave the council and we would not have that anymore. If we're doing it with the 241, which I completely support, makes complete sense, it does confuse me why we wouldn't make that same transition with the 73. So my recommendation would be to switch those two for that reason.
Well, why don't we do this? Why don't we take the balance of the committee assignments and make a vote on those, and then return to the TCA member position? Is that okay, Mr. Munoz?
Point of clarification, which ones are we going to not vote on?
The Foothill Eastern Transportation and the San Joaquin Transportation Corridor will have a separate discussion on those items.
Can I ask Mr. Mayor if we just go over it one more time and make sure I have everything written down right?
Absolutely. Okay, on the Animal Services Subcommittee, we have Mr. Oliveira replacing Mr. Mueller as the alternate. We'll leave out the Foothill ones for this at this point. JPA was changed from alternated from Vic Sork being the primary to Mr. Schoeffel being the alternate. We have the Ocean Institute Board of Directors back to what we had prior to that, the mayor and the mayor pro tem as the alternate. As I mentioned, the Orange County Fire Authority, the alternate position has been eliminated. The two terms with 1 year remaining each are the Orange County Library Board Advisory Board. That's Mr. Oliveira and Mr. Miller. The Orange County Mosquito and Vector Control was Mr. Oliveira with 1 year remaining. And then next to last but not least, for this upcoming Financial Review Committee, I propose the Mayor and Mayor Pro Tem.
I'd move those recommendations, Mr. Mayor.
I'll second.
It's been regularly moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Okay, seeing none, I'll call for the vote. The motion for the exception of the two TCA committees passes 5-0. Thank you. Okay, returning to the TCA two boards, I think, from seeing Mr. Schoeffel and at work on the subcommittees and his job there, I think it would be to the benefit of our city and the county to have him remain on that and have the two, Mr. Miller and Mr. Vixorek, work together to learn what this position encompasses and the detail of it. And I think I'd stick with that as my recommendation.
Mr. Mayor, if I can just ask a question of you. Over the past year, you and I have worked very closely together as I've been the prime on both of these boards. You've been the alternate. How has your experience, how has the mentor-mentee relationship worked during that period of time? Do you feel better equipped to, if, say, you were the person who was to head into the primary and jump in there and conversing with the issues going back to the late 90s. Did I do a good job of getting you ready?
Absolutely. I think you're well respected amongst your peers and the staff at TCA. And I think the majority of the public hearings take place on the first board, the 73 board. And I think much of the information, the primary speaking, is done by the public at that first hearing. And then the 241 follows that, and some of the members change around, but I think it's imperative to have somebody in a leadership role that's experienced with that.
Okay, that was my only comment.
Any other comments?
Mr. Mayor, I guess I'm confused by that last comment. If you're saying that they're two separate boards, but they're treated as one, why do you advocate splitting the two then? And if the public comment is made at the 73, wouldn't it be more beneficial to have the new primary there at that, as opposed to someone with the experience that Councilman Schoeffel has? Wouldn't need to have it for the 241. I don't understand what your point is that you're driving at there.
If I may, Mr. Mayor. It's a good question. These meetings go back to conserve time, resources, directors' time, since there's a lot of work involved in both of these boards. There are issues of commonality between the two boards, although the two boards are quite separate. The 241 issues are sometimes different than the 73 issues, depending on the meeting. Since the 73 meeting begins at 9 o'clock, and there's some crossover in membership of both boards, there tends to be the more robust, on the issues of common interest, there tends to be more robust discussion, public comment, things like that, so that when those issues are heard at the 241, they're still heard, the presentations are still made, the discussion is still robust, but as a matter of fact, everybody's sitting out, just like our gallery here tonight, listening to it both. So clearly the burden of the more experienced board member rests with that first meeting most of the time. Having said that, the issues heard in 241 are not only sometimes different, but sometimes issues that really are very much more forward-looking, because has to do with extension of certain mobility facilities in South Orange County and things like that, which are the 241-91 connector. That's a 241 project. That's a huge issue that's going to be on deck that is going to require a lot of getting up to speed with. So I think there's plenty of room for people to get their feet wet to get the experience of working as a committee member and sometimes on joint committees, so that you actually get to meet with membership of both boards. But I would say that the 73 for those 60 to 70% of common issues definitely gets the brunt of the initial discussion. It's as if we had 2 meetings here, and we brought in another city council, and of which 3 people were the same, and but with 40% of a different agenda. So they're very different. They don't just split.
Mr. Mayor?
Mr. Oliver, yes, sir.
I'm hearing a consensus, so I'll move a recommendation to accept the mayor's recommendations.
Is there a second?
I'd second.
All right, any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote.
Hit the wrong button.
Which one did you want to hit?
Hit the wrong button.
You can hit absent.
Can we do a revote, please?
Yep.
I don't know if I can do this twice.
Can we do a revote? There we go. All right, the motion passes on a 3-2 with Councilmember Miller and Big Sorick noes.
Mr. Mayor, may I just confirm, so I have the correct, for the record, that for the Foothill Eastern, which is the 241, the motion and second were for Councilmember Miller being the director and Councilmember Schoeffel being the alternate. And also for the 73, Councilmember Schoeffel to remain as the director and Mayor Pro Tem Bixoric as the alternate. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, moving on to item number 28. Is there a staff report on item number 28?
There is not a staff report here. Mayor Tomlinson, as you're aware, you added this so that the council could have a discussion regarding the town center initiative, and then whatever the council decides, if anything, staff would be prepared to take that action or respond to any questions the council may have. But again, I think this was just agendized to have a discussion amongst the council on the town center initiative.
Okay, I take it there's no public comments on this, Madam Clerk?
No,
Okay.
no, Mr. Mayor.
I'll move it to the council for discussion. I'll open it up.
It's okay. I'm glad you put this on the agenda for simple discussion. We already had one public comment that kind of addresses this. The questions I've been getting a lot of is, what is the city going to do? And so I guess I'd like to ask Mr. Munoz, what can a city do and not do in regards to law about initiative? In using public funds to either support or deny a ballot initiative.
The city cannot engage in campaigning. It can't use public funds for campaigning. It is permissible to have used public funds to come up with a report, which we had. It was presented. It's permissible for the city to prepare ballot arguments in opposition, and based on your vote, ballot arguments, responsive ballot arguments in reply to arguments in favor, as we've talked about. It's permissible for you to authorize, the council members to draft those arguments and to rely on staff for kind of the clerical type of support that goes along with that. You cannot use funds to, I'm just making this up as a for instance, you couldn't use city funds to come up with a bunch of signs to post around town saying, vote no on the initiative, things like that. You could not use city funds to draft up mailers that were sent to all the registered voters in town. I don't know if that answers your question, but that's kind of a sample of what you can and can't do with public funds.
Yeah. Thank you very much for that answer. I've seen, as mentioned earlier, I've seen the YouTube video now of our meeting in December, where the report that Mr. Munoz just referred to that was presented to us was a 33-minute report. Was very, very well done, and a lot of people have commented how well and informative that report was. And so I'm just glad that there's somebody out there taking some proactive approach to it.
Mr. Rivera, one thing I should add to my prior comments, as individual council members, you're entitled to do whatever you want on your own time to support or advocate against the initiative, if you like, on your own time. And you can use your title as mayor, council member, mayor pro tem, whatnot. But the city can't expend funds on campaigning issues.
Okay. Thank you. Those are my comments.
Anybody else?
Yeah,
Mr. Shuffle.
just briefly, I thought the speaker at the dais made a good point. He's curious about the matters that are the subject of the initiative. Come to the city. Go to the resources the city has. Those are sunk dollars so far as I'm aware. There's no further expenditure of money. They can. The last time I looked at the city webpage, the very first item under news was the report. So you click the link, the report comes up. There's a lot of information out there. If somebody asks me, that's usually where I direct them. So, and that seemed to accord with the speaker's experience earlier. What I wouldn't want to get into is a situation where we had to do this twice because there was some argument that the city somehow improperly got involved in a campaign, the purpose of which was to keep the city out of it in the first place. So that would be, but I would certainly encourage anybody to call our community development director, call any of the council people on their own time, anything like that, to access all the information that's out there. And it's important.
Councilmember Miller, you got a comment?
Yeah. I can't help but think about all the number of people that come up to me and they don't understand what this ballot initiative is. They don't know what's in it. They're not exactly sure what they signed. When you lay out what's in it, what was in the previous town center plan, a lot of people are shocked that's what this conversation was about. I mean, the original plan was vetted for 10 years, over 30 public meetings, and they didn't realize what was actually being changed, what was in that initiative. I'm not sure how we go about doing this, but I think it's important to get an education program out there so people really understand what's going on in this thing and address the one change that we did make to it. I mean, we did add parking to this plan. It's the one thing that the community didn't get a chance to weigh in on, other than at the few public meetings that we had. And going along with some of what the initiative people are saying, let's let the public vote. And maybe this is the time to start thinking about that. That we should put something out there. I mean, they're asking to vote against something without the option for voting for it in terms of parking. And maybe we need to think about, should we put something on the ballot as well? I don't know if we have that opportunity or how that works. I guess I'm asking Mr. Munoz that question about, can we do something like that?
Well, you can't do an educational campaign. I mean, that would be campaigning. I mean, if you wanted to put a competing ballot measure on, you're certainly entitled to do that if you like. Maybe I'm not understanding. Are you asking me how that works? Is that what your question is?
Yeah, I guess I was getting to, I understand the educational thing. We can't use public funds to do that because that would be considered a campaign.
Okay.
But the parking piece of it is the only thing that the community really hasn't had a shot or a real opportunity to put their input on, because it didn't take 10 years to do that. Is there a way that we could do something with parking on the ballot to let them have a chance to vote on that?
The basic rule is that the city council can put any ordinance that it wants up for a vote. It operates exactly like the petition process works that the initiative proponents went through, except that you don't have to go through that part of it. So you just basically call for the vote, and then all the other requirements that fall into play, like the ballot arguments and the timing and all those things, come into play afterwards. So if you had a specific ordinance in mind that you wanted to put on a ballot, you adopt a resolution, and you can adopt an ordinance to do it as well, but you can do it by resolution, and it applies to ordinances. The basic rule is that you can't, I'd have to do a little teeny bit of research on it, but there's some timing issues on when the election would be. I could figure it out while we're sitting here, but I just need a few moments to do that.
Okay. I mean, I guess I was bringing it up to the council to see if there's any interest in doing that. It's the one piece of the town center plan that has not been voted on. We could do something like that, because the initiative most definitely changes that part of it. So I didn't know if it was something we'd be interested in doing, or I guess I'm putting it up for discussion.
I'm a little confused. We spent close to 3 months adopting that parking ordinance with no fewer than 4 or 5, if you count the planning commission, 6 public hearings. So
Yeah, that's true, but we spent 10 years on the town center plan with over 30 public hearings, so people could get a chance to look at it. And I'm just saying, maybe this is the one piece that didn't get vetted as well as the plan did, and maybe people don't truly understand it, and this is a part that they can vote on. So, I mean, that's why I'm bringing it up. I'm not saying that we didn't do a good job on it. I'm saying we didn't spend as much time on it. And after 30 public meetings on the town center plan, maybe it's time to take a look at the parking as well. It's just something that's out there. If there's no appetite for it, I mean.
Victoria, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think I understand what Councilman Miller is saying. I've had a similar experience, I think, what he described, and especially what the speaker alluded to today, that there's some confusion out there. I don't want to say intentional misinformation. It's just that there are people that have heard about the Town Center Initiative, think or thought it meant one thing, have since found out that perhaps it's going to have the opposite effect of what they wanted to happen. And I've just found that there is some confusion out there. I think this discussion is to talk about, is there any way that the council can help clear up that confusion, short of doing something we're not supposed to do? Now, from what I've heard, there's a possibility of putting a competing ballot initiative out there, which would essentially, if we were to adopt it, it would clarify, make the choice clear for the voters so that they don't go in confused to the ballot box. I mean, that's not what we want. We want them to have a clear choice between A or B. So I think if I understand what Councilman Miller is saying, I think I would support such a ballot initiative if it's going to clear up any misconceptions or confusion. And I think the way to do that, incorporating, again, and I won't speak for Councilman Miller, I'll let him correct me if what I'm saying is incorrect, but basically taking the town center plan as it is, and the ballot initiative would be essentially a restatement of the town center plan as has been passed over time, as we've discussed, but also incorporate the parking changes that we've talked about. Put it in, I guess, one package as to where we stand right now and the direction that we're moving. And that would really, I believe, give the voters a clearer understanding of what is going on with this initiative. That's all I have, Mr. Mayor, for now.
Mr. O'Vara.
Let me toss out an idea. I think I too think I understand what the objective is. When the initiative came out after the town center plan was approved, but before our parking plan was approved. We spent another 3 months doing a parking plan. The parking plan was withdrawn from the town center plan in order to get it through the Coastal Commission. Then we went back with a parking plan which was presently being reviewed by the Coastal Commission. I don't know if we have a date or anything, any window of when that's going to come back, but maybe this council could ask staff to bring back a separate report to us talking specifically about the parking plan, what was in the original plan and what our proposed at the Coastal Commission plan is, and the difference in the benefits of them.
Excuse me one second. I just want to clarify that because, Ursula, when we submitted, after the city council took action on that plan, we submitted to the Coastal Commission, and you were dialoguing with them after that, but then you were also dialoguing with them during the formation of it. My understanding is that upon the commission hearing about the initiative, they suspended their effort and put it on hold until such time as the initiative process went through. Is that correct?
They went at their December meeting and extended their timeline to schedule that for a hearing, and they're waiting to see what happens with the initiative before spending significant staff time reviewing our submission.
Copy.
Yeah, just briefly, the town center plan, as it was enacted after the 30-plus hearings, is the existing state of law as I understand it. Is that correct, Mr. Munoz?
That's correct.
The parking ordinance, as it was passed over the number of public hearings that I referenced earlier, is the existing state of the law.
No, because it hasn't been certified by the Coastal Commission
But
yet.
I didn't say that it was enforceable. I said it's the existing state of the law so far as lawful actions passed by this body up here.
That's correct.
Okay, so a superior agency, the Coastal Commission, has the right to review and approve that, but we, I believe, acted lawfully. We certainly took a long time doing it. I sat through all those hearings. I thought it was very thoughtfully and very thoroughly discussed. So what I think I'm hearing proposed here this evening is that we take two pieces of existing law that were duly lawfully passed with public notice and put it on the ballot to make it what? That's the so if someone were confused, for example, I might just say, go read the existing law, superimpose this parking ordinance on it, and that's what you should be comparing to the initiative. I don't know how you put, unless you rescind the existing law, I don't know how you put it on a ballot. Is there some sort of post hoc ratification process I'm unaware of?
Well, there wouldn't be any prohibition on doing that. I mean, just an ordinance, so you can, I mean, you could put it out there.
To vote on existing law?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I pulled up the section while we were talking. It says, any ordinance, so,
So if we had a speed limit on our streets that said 25 miles an hour in residential neighborhoods, that's been the speed limit, say, since the city became a city in 1989, we could put that on the ballot just to see how the folks felt about it.
Speed
after
limit,
all these years.
I mean, I understand your point, and I mean, this is hyper-technical. I mean, the theoretical answer to your theoretical question is sort of yes, but speed limits are adopted by resolutions, not ordinances, and they've got all these other government code requirements about meeting warrants and stuff like that, so it's not a perfect example, but...
Short-term vacation rentals. There was controversy on that matter.
Yes, you could do
I
that.
still hear about that.
Yes, you could put the vacation rental ordinance on a ballot. I mean, frankly, lots of cities have done exactly that on vacation rental ordinances to kind of just sort of throw it up to the public and see what they want to do.
Do they do it after they enact it through the lawful elected representative process?
I don't know.
I guess that's where my confusion is. How do you take a law, and it's already a law, and then put it to the people, say, should this be a law or not? It's already the law.
Well, I guess it wouldn't be a law. Hold on.
I think our parking ordinance is a law.
Feeling a little Dr. Seussish in what I was about to say, let me back up. In the event that the current town center initiative, the one that's already out there, that we've had an election call for, were to pass, then the work the council's done in the past wouldn't be the law anymore. If two initiatives were out there, or two ballot measures, probably the better technical term, were out there, and one passed, and if they both passed, actually, the one with the most votes wins. If one passes and one doesn't pass, I mean, there's all kinds of gyrations that can come out of this. But the one question I was scratching my head about, kind of along the lines of, I mean, somewhat similar to what Councilmember Schoeffel was raising, is this: if the voters were to approve a proposal, I mean, I'm hearing slightly different proposals. I think I heard Councilmember Miller talking about just the parking part, but I heard Councilmember Visoric talking about, wrapping it all together, including the parking part. So you just assume it's that we're talking about for a second. If the voters pass that, technically the only way it could ever be amended would be through the voters. So that would be, I guess that would be different than what we currently have. And I guess my question is that what you're talking about? Because you could have an initiative, I suppose it's or a ballot measure that said that you specifically want in the future for amendments to be with the council, not with the voters. I mean, you can adopt an ordinance, says whatever you want to say. I just, I need to know what you're talking about.
Sure, if I may. I think, actually, you may have answered the question that I was going to ask you. So if I understood you correctly, if an ordinance were to be put on by the city council and were to be passed, then the only changes that could be made to it would be if there were another initiative passed, unless we wrote into the initiative that from here on out, it basically resets the law as is. The city council would be able to make changes to it. Is that what I understood you to say?
Well, I was asking the question, but I was asking the question that you just articulated.
So that would be more the intent, obviously, to basically make it clear for the voters that instead of the town center initiative.
So what I hear you saying is you want to put out a vote for, in essence, using what Councilmember Schoeffel was saying, the status quo. I mean, you want to give people a chance to vote on the way it is, or to vote on what's being proposed by the initiative proponents.
Right, especially due to the confusion out there, it would be good to put it side by side. And some of the examples I believe that Councilman Schoeffel was referring to, there are no current ballot initiatives to alter the speed limit or whatnot. In this particular case, we have one out there that's creating confusion amongst our constituents. And therefore, that's why I think it's actually a good idea to put one out there that basically reiterates what the current state of the law is, with the changes that we've made in the parking that haven't been approved yet by the Coastal Commission, to basically restate where we're at, where we're going, give the voters a clear choice. And that way, as you said, if one gets more votes than the other, that one controls.
Ask a quick foundational question. What are our time frames that we're talking about here? When do we? What are our deadlines, and when do things have to happen?
Okay, so I'm scrambling while you're talking here. I want to look up. There's a statute on competing initiatives I want to look at in a second too. So bear with me, and I'll answer your question. The answer to your question is it's not less than 88 days. So we could, in theory, if the council called for if you want to put an ordinance on the ballot, a council-initiated ballot measure, I can't remember the exact dates that we worked with. I want to say March 7th was the date that we had set for
arguments.
All the arguments, so you'd have to back up from that.
Analysis.
So there's work that would have to be done that staff's going to have to scramble on. So if you want to do it, it's the kind of a thing, you've got a little bit of time, but it would certainly be helpful from our perspective if this is something you want to do. I think we should, agendize it for some, if we get some direction on something specific, we can put it on an agenda, then you can vote up or down on it. But if we're going to do that, we should do it sooner rather than later, so that there's enough time in the little bit of time that's left before the March 7th hard deadlines start to come into play, that if that's what you want to do, we'll have time to do it.
So the March 7th deadline was set by the filing of the original Town Center initiative.
No, the March 7th deadline is a statutory deadline that you back into from the decision to have the special election on the initiative consolidated with the June primary. So then you back into deadlines of when the election has to, there's windows when the election has to occur, and then there's windows within which all the ballot arguments have to be prepared and submitted to the registrar of voters. So that's kind of really the big moving step. I'm trying to think, Kathy, are there other things that, procedural things that we have to do? It's really just the ballot arguments, right? That,
Impartial analysis, ballot arguments.
right. So there's, there's some of that kind of, the same work that we're going to be doing at the staff level for the current initiative, the same ballot argument issues that you've discussed before. There has to be time to allow for that to occur. So I don't have a, hold on, let me get a calendar in front of me.
Mr. Mayor, what I might suggest is rather than make Mr. Munoz guess at what the law and procedure is on this, that did you have knowledge of what this process was before this hearing started tonight, Mr. Munoz?
I'm sorry?
Did you have knowledge of what issue was going to be discussed on this agenda item other than a general discussion about the initiative?
No, I mean, I generally know the law in the area because of all the work we've done recently, but some of the stuff I need to bone up on to answer your specific questions.
So really answering it off the cuff is not the type of advice you would recommend to your client.
That is always.
No matter how.
What I can tell you is, because there's only a handful of sections on it, the basic rules are this: if you want to adopt a council-initiated ballot measure, you need to adopt a resolution to put it forward. If you want to put something forward, we got to get it onto an agenda so that you can, vote on it. I suppose in a very, very liberal reading of the Brown Act, you could do that this evening if you wanted, but there's a lot of moving parts to what you're talking about. I would suggest, if this is something you want to go down, that you talk about kind of framework of what you'd like it to look like. Give us some direction on what that would be. We can bring it back at, next meeting. And then it gives both you a chance to consider it and the public a little bit more notice about what it is that you're talking about doing, so interested parties could show up and talk about it and give you their input. And then we can make sure we've got all the T's crossed and I's dotted, as Councilmember Shovell's alluding to. It's not something I'd be a little bit uncomfortable with you rushing into something like this tonight just to make sure that you're doing it right.
That sounds like an acceptable process to me.
So, Mr. Mello, go ahead, please. So are we talking about tonight we give the framework for something, and then decide at the next meeting if we want to move it forward, or is that what you're suggesting?
Yeah,
right now,
give us some direction on what you have in mind. If there's, critical question, if there's 3 people that want us to pursue that, then we can take what you have in mind, put it together in a framework that you can then look at your next meeting. Remember, whatever it is that you vote on at your next meeting, that it will be the ordinance that's going to go forward if you were to call for an election on it. So we need to kind of just, cobble together the 2 components I heard you talk about into a, it's just a template really at some level. So, here's an ordinance that adopted this and this, and whatever else you give us, but it needs to be done. That's a very rudimentary sort of.
Well, I guess what I was getting at, I was thinking just basically the parking, but after hearing Mr. Victoric, I think I like his idea better about putting both of them together and then having a discussion. I think it is important. There's so much confusion out there. Having them side by side on the ballot and whatever the language is in there, let the voter at that point really know what they're voting for. And so I think, I would like to move this forward and have some put together, but do more of what Mr. Victoric was saying, and I don't want to put words in his mouth either, so I'd like him to reiterate what he was talking about. But I think we do need to take in consideration. There's a lot of confusion. I get a lot of people talking to me, they don't understand it, and they're really not sure what they ended up signing up for. So
what I was looking at before, and I'm sorry I was distracted, was just trying to figure out dates here and timing. If this is something that you're meaningfully interested in looking at, I really think we need to bring it back on the February 2nd meeting. I mean, that's not a drop-dead deadline, but if you see something is presented to you then, you want to tweak it some more, do some other things, it at least gives you one more meeting, and we're getting down to really, compressed timeframes if it gets past that, if there's something you want to do. So,
if I could offer up in the alternative, because of the timing issue, and I want to make sure that we get it right technically, if there's 3 votes to pursue this, what I'd offer up is that you appoint 2 of your members to work with the city attorney and the city clerk to bring something back for the council to consider at the second meeting, so that, I think that's probably the more efficient use of the time from my standpoint, as opposed to bringing something back. Well, that's really not quite it, this and that. So again, if there's 3 votes, I'd suggest that. And my big concern is the timing aspect. Because if this is something the council wants to do, one, we have to make sure we do it right, but it also reflects the will of the majority of the council.
So we wouldn't be deciding on that. We wouldn't be deciding at this meeting what that ordinance or that ballot measure looks like. It's just the concept of maybe putting forth a competing ballot.
I think if the council could come up with a concept and appoint 2 of your members to work with Patrick and Kathy to come up with something, that way there's a framework there, but we can fill it in so that it, something the council can consider, so we're not, writing it on the fly next time.
And Mr. Mayor, if I might, a lot of that work is dependent upon what Mr. Munoz's thorough legal analysis is as to whether there's authority to do that under those circumstances in the first place. So that's probably an even better reason to appoint 2 people to work with the city attorney, to work with staff, to and then agendize it in a specific manner.
Mr. Mayor?
I would move Mr. Vichorik and Mr. Muller to be those 2 members, since they.
I would second that.
Yeah.
It'd be helpful. I'm sorry, I mean to interrupt your discussion. But.
Okay, any further discussion on that?
I'll just,
Mr.
I just think it's important for Patrick that I think it's important for the council to provide some additional information for Mr. Vichorik and Mr. Miller. Patrick.
Well, I think I understand what Mr. Vichorik is saying. It's kind of, you basically want us to take, I'll call it the status quo, and put that into an ordinance, so people can say yes or no on the status quo or on the initiative. That's kind of what I'm hearing. Is that?
I think that's a fair representation. The one thing I wanted to mention was, you said you were going to get to my question about the competing initiatives. I know that the current town center plan has a clause regarding competing initiatives, and so in order to make clear what the difference between the 2, if we were to put in a clause as well, this is part of the direction or part of the motion, that we would need a clause in there as well to make sure that it is the opposite or in conflict with the town center initiative, to make sure that the decision is clear.
This gets a little bit to what Councilmember Schoeffel was saying about, I don't want to guess, but I believe, and I've actually had a bunch of election-related stuff here from our last meeting that, I was kind of prepared to talk about, and I haven't had a chance to plow through it. But I believe that the rule is that if you have a voter-based initiative, like the town center initiative that's already out there, and then you have a council initiative, if they both pass, then any provisions that are not in conflict with each other would also be effective. But if you do what you've suggested, then obviously everything would be in direct conflict, so it's really kind of a one or the other. And there's a case that I can't remember the name of the case, but I think what it says is if you put in language like what is in the initiative you're talking about, then it kind of makes it clear that it's intended to be in direct conflict, so that you're not trying to cobble together, well, if this passes, well, this line is effective and all these other lines aren't. But that's something I'd really appreciate the time to be able to research to make sure that I've got it right.
So I have a motion to appoint Mr. Miller and Mr. Vichorik as the subcommittee of this council to work with you on the legal issues and work with staff on whatever the staff issues are in this, and have a proposed ordinance for consideration at an agendized hearing at the earliest possible time with a full legal report.
I just have one question. Don't we have 2 members appointed to write for the ballot from the city council for the initiative, for the response?
Then you and Carlos.
Now, does that mean, is there any problem with another 2 council members working on an issue?
So in other words, what you're saying is we have 2 council members working on the arguments against, so that's sort of related to this topic. Would it be a Brown Act problem if we have a different 2 council members working on the topic we're talking about tonight? Is that your question?
That is the genesis of my question, yes.
And that should be addressed in your very thorough legal analysis.
Help me remember who the council members are that are writing the ballot arguments.
I think it was the mayor and mayor pro tem.
For the sake of the timing issues that I am concerned about that we were talking about earlier, and since I haven't had a chance to research that issue, the safer course might be to have the same 2 people who are writing the ballot arguments be in charge of this, if that's acceptable. I mean, my gut reaction, if you want a gut reaction, is that it's probably not a Brown Act problem because they're different topics. I mean, we're talking about a whole ballot measure now that's a new topic as opposed to arguments for and against, but without more time to thoroughly research it in advance, I don't want to hamstring you and create a problem.
As part of that, in keeping with that, perhaps what we can do is, Patrick, if you can find that out, lickety-split, so that, if Mr. Miller wants to work with McSork, that's great. If not, if Mr. Tomlinson wants to work with McSork, that's great. But I just want to make sure that the council, you resolve that, and then the council can say, okay, if this...
So you've complicated it one more level. You want to have a contingent alternate subcommittee.
Yeah.
But my strong preference would be that you just have the same 2 council members who are writing the ballot arguments be on the subcommittee. That way, it's just one issue I don't have to worry about. But if you feel strongly that you don't want that, I don't think it's a Brown Act problem. I could research it quickly, and if I come back and think that it is, then we can have an alternative appointment tonight that if I come back and say it's a problem, that before any work starts, that we go back to the ballot argument folks being the ballot measure drafters.
So are you asking for a 10-minute recess?
That would be awesome. If that helps the council, that would help me.
Mr. Ruffey, you had a comment?
No, I'm 10-minute recess. Sounds
all right. This council is hereby for approximately 10 minutes.
Go figure it out.
Another question, Jasper, while I was looking. My recommendation on the formation of the subcommittee is that you should keep it the same as the subcommittee on the ballot argument we talked about last time, just so that no one can make the argument that we have 3 council members that are interacting outside of a public meeting on a topic that is at least close in proximity to to itself. It's too close of a call that I'm comfortable saying have 2 different subcommittees. With respect to the question on conflicting initiatives, did stumble into the case that I was thinking about, and basically the recommendation from the League of Cities folks is that in these situations that you should, as I was suggesting, put in specific language saying that you view this as a direct conflict, so that there won't be questions about which one is effective and which one's not effective if they were to both pass. The way it works, as I said before, is if you have competing initiatives, if they both pass, one with the most votes becomes effective. If neither of them pass, then it's like neither of them ever existed. And then getting back to a question that Mr. Alvarez, Councilmember Alvarez had kind of alluded to earlier on, in terms of what you can and can't do, when you have specific statutory authority to do something, you can spend funds. But in the absence of specific statutory authority, you can't spend funds on a campaign issue. So the council can put can put a ballot measure out there if following what we've discussed, that, at the next meeting, that there's something to do that. And you can, statutorily authorized to do arguments in favor and against. And with respect to a council-initiated ballot measure, there's a specific provision that says that you can draft arguments in favor of it. So those are things you're statutorily authorized to do. But beyond that, you couldn't spend any money, so you still couldn't spend city funds on like signs or mailers or TV ads or anything like that for the council's ballot measure. So just, bear that in mind. So those are kind of the rules of the road. And my suggestion then is that we revisit the question of who the subcommittee is. And I don't recall if we had already voted on that, so I apologize. But
No, we had a motion and a second.
So I think we should probably then do a substitute motion, would be my recommendation.
I'll substitute my own, or I'll amend my motion to include the subcommittee that this council approved to do the drafting and the preparation of the ballot statement, for the initiative at our last meeting. I believe that was you, Mr. Mayor, and Mr. Vichort.
And I'll second that motion as before.
Okay, and it's been regularly moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion?
I have one more question for Mr. Munoz. I didn't catch when you were talking about how individual council members can act or speak out. Can we do that as council members, or do we have to, take our council member hats off and do it as residents if we want to get involved at that level?
You can use your council member title. I mean, you are council, but you're speaking on behalf of yourselves, not on behalf of the council. But you can.
Okay.
You can't use city funds, or resources. So you couldn't come down, just to make up an example, you couldn't come down to City Hall and ask Jackie, who's your assistant, to send out a bunch of letters on your behalf on this topic.
Okay.
If anybody has questions on that,
if I'm speaking to somebody somewhere and they quote me as Councilmember Miller said this, that it's.
If you go to a community event and you speak on this topic for or against as Councilmember Miller, that's perfectly okay.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any further questions or comments? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. The motion carries 5-0. All right, moving on to public comments, staff reports. Mr. Shotkaves.
Yeah, I think it would be appropriate. I would be remiss if I didn't recognize someone in the crowd, and that would be Mr. Robert Sedita. Robert is leaving us to further his career with the city of Laguna Beach. I can't think of a better opportunity for a young professional like Mr. Sedita to broaden his horizons than to go to a full-service city like Laguna Beach and work on a lot of interesting projects. At the same time, while it's our loss, I want to thank him for his tireless efforts here, working with in community development, then with Mike and I, and we're going to see him again in the future. He's a real up-and-coming professional, and Robert, thank you very much for all your contributions, and I will always be your best reference, and good luck in the future.
Any other business, Mr. Shotkaves? No. Mr. Munoz?
I have nothing this evening.
All right. Moving council comments. Is there any council comments? Mr. Schoffer?
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Very good. Mr. Miller?
Yeah, I just want to say one thing. I see our battalion chief, Rob Capo, back there. I can never pronounce his last name, so he's just going to have to be Capo tonight. And I want to thank him for spending time with me over at Station 30 on my ride-along. And unfortunately, I was cursed I got the ride-along curse. We didn't get a single call, and as soon as I left, I got 17 right behind me. But I did enjoy my time speaking with the firefighters and the captain over there. It was very enlightening. Sitting on the Fire Authority board, you don't get a lot of chances to interact with those guys, and they're really interesting people. And they're concerned about what's going on, but we don't really ever get to hear their side. So that was really enjoyable for me. So we'll set up another one where hopefully we'll get to go out on the truck I'm sorry, the engine. We have engines here. So thank you for that, and I've already turned in my list of meetings. Thanks.
Mr. Oliver.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Our packet tonight was very thick with a lot of information in it. There would have been a lot of items I would want to have pulled just to discuss it and let the community hear all the things that the staff is doing. Item 13, our Doheny Village Plan update. In there was the budget summary. The monies that were spent for this so far is budgeted $726,000. On item 15, annual review of investment policy. We're seeing that interest rates are going up, and we now have some of our bonds expiring, and they'll be going from a low interest rate below 1% to something a little bit better, which is above 1%. Not much, but it's going in the right direction. On 18, we did talk about the homeless task force, and I think, again, this is Dana Point taking the lead. I frequently, I know as quite a few of you may also have business to transact in Santa Ana, and the Civic Center is having a real serious problem. And so my hat's off to Sheriff or Chief Chilton and his deputies for the proactive work that you're doing for Dana Point. 19, consultant services between the city and Michael Baker International. Again, this is for the EIR for Doheny Village, and what we did is we increased the budget to make sure that that happened. Number 20, planning services agreement. Again, we have two senior planners leaving, one left and one leaving Dana Point, again going on to better things. It's nice that Dana Point is the training ground for the rest of Orange County. And 21, amendment of the consultant services. We're doing that for the Doheny Village Plan, adding more money to getting things done. There's a lot in here that that the staff has done very recently, and I just want to commend Mr. Shakevich and the excellent team effort to get this thing done, get all our work done. And I've turned my meeting minutes already into the city clerk.
That's two already. Let's see, Mayor Pro Tem Vixoric, your comments, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have nothing to report. I will turn in my list of meetings after the meeting. Thank you.
All right. Well, I too would like to wish everybody a happy New Year, and I'd like to echo Mr. Olvera's comments about the city staff, the level of work they've done here. To read it all is a tough job, but to put it together is even a tougher job. So, Mr. Shakevich and city staff members, thank you for all the hard efforts that you've done on behalf of our city. And with that, I will announce the next regular meeting of the City Council will be February 2nd, 2016 at 5 p.m. in this council chamber. And with that, I will adjourn this meeting.